Sunday Night Lives. Josh and
Yeah.
Laura Sunday Night Lives.
A
Live.
funny little ring to it,
Oh well, kind of like Saturday Night Live.
but
Not
not
nearly
quite.
as not nearly as funny. Hopefully, not nearly as political. Uh, maybe more helpful. Although Saturday
Yeah.
Night Live had its moments. That's for sure. Well, anyway, as people start to join us, it'll be good to have them there. If not, if you're listening to this at another point in time, he didn't even come on the screen.
No, he
Laura's
didn't.
husband, Matthew, just delivered something for the podcast and he refused to be on camera.
That can't be surprising to anyone who knows him.
He's a behind the scenes guy. We love Matthew. Laura, thank you for being here. People
Yeah.
don't know this, but you've been out, sick, not feeling well, not in the office,
Yeah.
except for Monday. I think when I yelled through the hall or through the wall a few times, you should go home. You should go home.
I was just blowing my nose on Monday.
Yeah, popping Dayquil or something that
I did
was,
take Dayquil, yeah.
yeah. Anytime you're taking Dayquil, probably a good day to not be in the office. Anyway, I
Oh,
was proved right. You needed to be home for the week.
I did need to be home for the week.
Yeah, so hopefully you're feeling better and we'll be back in the office. And I did my best to cover for you in all of the meetings that
Thank you.
it was
Yes, it
not
was a
near.
very bad week to be sick. There was a lot of meetings that I needed to be at, or I wanted to be at.
We made it happen.
Yeah.
We got through the meetings without you. I did want to start off with a couple of fun things that if people don't know, I'm on Instagram. I totally got on Instagram for one reason, because of a communications book that we read late summer, fall,
Yeah.
and it just opened up the idea of, in communication, a church channel, church Instagram or whatever, can get awfully busy if it's trying to communicate everything. And then the idea of the pastor having their own channel of communication. And so I've been trying to, just this year, I probably signed up 6 months ago and never posted anything, when I'm out doing fun things on behalf of Gateway, to post about it, to think about it. And so maybe 2 weeks ago, I don't remember if I mentioned this last week, did a scholarship for UF Ministries, was part of the interview process there. You were there, a couple others were there. And then this past Thursday evening, there was the annual board meeting for Christian Clearinghouse, and Gateway was honored as their partner that they wanted to recognize. And your dad was there. Your dad is heavily involved with Christian Clearinghouse. And so I tried to get
Yeah.
him to be the one who went up and received the award.
Yeah.
He went up with me, and then I
Okay.
tried to throw him under the bus when the lady wanted to hand the microphone for something to be said. I stepped away so that he got the microphone, and then I still got the microphone as well. The cool story, and you may know this, Laura, Christian Clearinghouse, first off, you probably know more about what they do. What would you give as like the snapshot of what you've heard your dad talking about Christian Clearinghouse?
Yes, the clearinghouse, they have a lot of partner churches that will, like, in a sense, pool their money together in order to help provide, to help meet needs within our community. So if people are struggling with paying bills or, um, yeah, a lot of times paying
Food was
bills,
the big one they talked about now,
food,
is food assistance.
yeah, clothing sometimes, things like that. Instead of going around to each individual church and asking for help, the clearinghouse becomes one place that we can say we support the clearinghouse, and we can kind of point people there, um, to help meet some of those needs. And the idea being that a lot of churches all contributing together is really able to effectively provide more support than just an individual church by themselves.
And it helps, the clearinghouse can keep track of individuals they've
Yes.
helped, where churches, we don't know if the individual has gone to every church trying to
Yes.
get help. And so they help with that. Emergency needs is kind of where they tackle. The clearinghouse started, I believe, in 1994. And what I learned on Thursday night was it began in the basement of what is now our North Main campus. That First
Oh,
Church, or First Disciples Church,
uh-huh.
620 North Main Street, the basement was the
Interesting.
original Christian Clearinghouse location when this
Interesting.
organization started nearly 30 years ago, or whatever that would have
Yeah.
been. And so that was neat for me to see of the providence of it turning around. And so I gave your dad the plaque. I said, Dale, if anyone should put this on their wall. And he asked me, it should be on our North Main campus's building wall somewhere, because that's where it all started.
Yeah.
As we were being honored for being their partner. So that was neat to see. That was Thursday night. Something else, just based on the series in the sermon today, when we talked about confessions, we talked about Dr. Larry Trotter coming to talk about confessions. The elders, I think we've mentioned this, are studying the Westminster Confession this year together. And I had a staff member say, hey, I would love to sit in to hear what you all are talking about as you talk about the Westminster Confession as the elders together. And so I don't know if we've ever said this. Our elder meetings are not behind lock and key, that anyone is welcome to attend. You could welcome to attend as an observer, meaning you're obviously not an elder, so you don't have a voice or vote. But if you wanted to hear the elders discussing the Westminster Confession, discussing how the theology that is there is applied in the life of our church, anyone is welcome. We meet the fourth Tuesday of the month in the original Christian Clearinghouse location, the North Main campus basement. We do actually are under lock and key because we're down in the basement, so we do lock the door. And so if you happen to know that you were ever going to come to visit, call your shepherding elder and let him know ahead of time so that we won't lock you out of the building just for security purposes. But anyone is always welcome to come and sit on that part of the meeting and hear your elders interact with one another and just see that camaraderie. And so again, if you're ever interested in just seeing what an elder meeting is like, you're more than welcome to come. I would just suggest the best way to go about is to contact your shepherding elder and let them know that you're interested in coming, and then they can make sure that you are allowed to get in the building on a late Tuesday night.
You're able.
Yeah, able. There you go. Much better word, Laura. Much better word. Imagine what the meeting was like without you correcting my vocabulary.
Was no doubt much better.
Yeah, last week. No, Laura. We were all struggling. All right, so we have some What's Josh Been Reading articles. And again, if you have any questions, I can see that some folks are tuning in. Feel free to comment and we can respond to your questions. We do have a couple of listener questions that are not sermon related, but we'll get to those in a bit. But we thought we would cover some What's Josh Been Reading. And so let's bring up Laura. We're going to do the technology again, getting used to this. Laura's going to bring up her screen. This first one, Trusting God Through Terminal Illness. This is by a man. What's that, Laura?
I'll see if I can get it bigger.
Okay. This is by a man who, what was there it is, motor neuron disease. And so this is a condition that's ultimately going to kill him. He's just losing more and more control of his motor skills, and now he has a ventilator to breathe, a tube in his stomach, and so on and so forth. And he was a pianist, and he started recognizing that his fingers weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. But this was such a beautiful article when I think of folks in our congregation who are struggling with various difficult illnesses. I know of one couple, the husband and the wife are both struggling with cancer, and different surgeries have been done. There are just many, many different kinds of illnesses that people at Gateway are facing. And ultimately, we're all facing a terminal illness, our mortality. We're all going to die. And there was just some beautiful reminders from a man that I have to imagine either had to voice, record this, or have somebody else type it for him due to the condition that he is in, and yet beauty and hope. So the four reminders, just like the overhead view, if you're facing an illness, if your illness may be in the mental health world, just great promises and reminders. One, that I am precious. Two, I am blessed. Three, I am useful. And fourth, I am being made new. And so I would just encourage you to go check out that article, these wonderful promises, scripture there. to remind us of these great truths, no matter what we're facing, no matter what these bodies of ours that may be breaking at a faster rate than others, the envy that I can only imagine in seeing people who are healthy and whole. I am precious, I am blessed, I am useful, I am being made new. And this is what I would also say. If that's not the situation that you're in, remember that these are true if you are the person suffering, but remember that these are truths for those in your life who are suffering, even when you're the one who's not suffering, that maybe the precious is easy, like they're precious. Finding ways to communicate without it being like almost like a Christian insulting of the
Like
situation, but like,
belittling or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that they are blessed, that they're useful, that they're
Yeah.
being made new, like finding the way to communicate through really empathizing with their situation, that that these aren't just like little Christian coffee mug things, that these are truths that they will know whether or not you believe it about them. And so just a great article, trusting God through terminal illness, that I would recommend if you are going through something like that or know someone who is. Another one, completely different kind of topic. This is from the Presbyterian Church in America's website for women. It's, I guess, they're like their women's blog, and I came across this one. Sometimes efficiency is overrated is the name
I
of
had
the
to laugh
article.
when I saw that. Like, I hadn't read the article yet, and I was like, "Oh boy, this one's gonna hurt."
Well, the whole
I
the
love
picture there of the
efficiency.
wheelbarrows is just her talking through a story of moving some bricks in her yard and deciding to be inefficient so that she would appreciate the process and the experience. Laura, I love efficiency. Do you like efficiency, Laura?
I love it.
Yeah, I think that most people really, really like efficiency. We are
Mhm.
a culture, a society that is driven by efficiency. We love our food. We love it fast. You know, we like it quick. I don't care if you call it fast food or quick service, you know, however you spin it. The point is, we don't like to wait. Um, I thought of when I was thinking of this article, efficiency is why parenting is so exhausting, because it's so inefficient kind of work. Like it's not quick work. And so
Yeah,
if you're a parent and you're exhausted and you feel like life is so inefficient, yep, you
you're
know,
probably doing it right then.
that's parenting. But the part down near the bottom, the gospel is fully sufficient, but often not efficient. There's this section, the gospel takes the long way, and just a lot of reminders of the wording that I put there was that the gospel is completely sufficient, but often inefficient. And so there's the story of, you know, they take Abraham and Sarah, the elderly man and the barren elderly wife, to be the father of many nations. That is not efficient. Israelites, you know, it was not a long walk from Egypt to the promised land, but it took them 40 years. That is not efficiency. You could just go down the long list of Joseph, 17, was it 17, 13 years in prison? I think he was in prison in Egypt to become second in command. The Israelites were slaves in Egypt for 400 years. Just lots of what we would consider inefficiency. And yet there's the fully sufficient promises throughout all of that. And I think in just our culture, that's why the Christian faith can often, I like true Christianity can often be packaged in a way where it is efficient, and then we're almost shocked as Americans when the first article we looked at becomes our reality,
Mm, yep.
and suddenly there's no efficient fix for that gentleman's situation, and then the
Mhm.
hopelessness and the despair. And so, in a way, these two articles are not related, and then another very real way, they are much related. And so, a great one if efficiency, irritation when the line is longer than you want it to be, or whatever it might be. Sometimes it's good. I go through the lines. I don't know if you do this, Lord, but like everywhere now has the self checkout, and
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
see. And this is what's crazy. I know the temptation of taking the self checkout even when there's a cashier open. because I think to myself, I'm more efficient than they are. And so, not to pat myself on the back, because I don't do this every time, but sometimes I'll choose the person and I'll say something like, I thought I'd choose the human today, like,
Yeah.
like that inefficient way of going about life just to practice the inefficiency of the gospel, but it is fully sufficient. So great article there. I would encourage you to go check that one out. And then finally, this one is kind of connected to the sermon, but I found it before, actually I found it last week, before I preached the sermon.
Yeah, I thought it really
And
did pretty well.
yeah, I was very, very pleased that this one came out this week. The title is Rest Takes Work. If you were at Gateway this morning, you know that we were talking about rest. We were talking about the fourth commandment, the Sabbath day, keeping it holy. The point of the article, and I didn't get into so much of this today, but some of the practical steps of how you really rest on the Sabbath is that it takes planning. And this whole article was about this guy's failing to plan for a week of rest, and he ended up wasting the whole week, and it not end up being very refreshing or
Mhm.
restful. He just realized that at the end of the week, I watched a bit more shows than I normally would have, but I didn't really rest. I didn't really spend time with the Lord, as we talked about today, that resting on the Sabbath is ultimately about who you are being with, that's the real work. And so practicing rest the Sabbath, it does take planning. That's probably a good follow-up to this morning. Some folks, my wife's best friend, they practice Sabbath keeping. And so to rest on the Sabbath, they prepare all of their meals the day before, so
Mm.
that her normal work is making meals for the family every day. And so she prepares the meals on Friday so that on Saturday she can rest from her normal work. That takes planning. That
Yeah.
doesn't happen without some foresight, but it can become a habit where for her now, that's just what happens on Fridays. And so there's all kinds of ways that principle can apply, um, over whether it's a 1 day a week rest, or this gentleman taking a week of rest, or longer periods of rest that we may take to be with God. Just take some planning. And so, great application question for all of us is, how are you planning for your day of rest? Because just because you stop one day doesn't mean that it actually was rest and being with God. And so, what are your plans for that day? And what's one thing that you can do to ensure that that day is a day of resting in the Lord, trusting in Him, being with Him, with your self, with your whatever your family is, or with friends, to make sure that you plan, because rest does take work. It takes a different kind of work, but it can make that day of rest much more meaningful for those of us. How do you do with rest, Laura?
Well, I thought that I did okay until like when I read that and it was like, oh, yeah, I definitely would fall into the category of like not really planning it. I'm good at like taking a nap, and maybe we do watch quite a bit of TV, do a puzzle and things like that. But I could definitely relate when he said, like, he got to the end of his week of, I would call it vacation, but his week of rest, time off from work, and it was kinda like, I look back and I think, "What did I do? Like, did I do anything productive? Did I do anything," and not productive in a work sense, but sometimes I have these goals, like there's maybe a book that is not really work related, but something like that, that I want to read, but I haven't really planned out to do. I just don't do it.
Mhm.
And he had some good ideas there about like enjoying creation. I thought that could be something when the weather's nicer, that maybe I start to incorporate just more going for walks, which I do, but being more intentional about it, about really stopping and like taking in the beauty of creation and not just walking to be outside or whatever. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, very much so. And the Sabbath principle, in Scripture, in the Old Testament especially, there was a Sabbath principle that was also related to the land. And so, we think of 1 day out of the seven, but then, there's the principle of the land having a year of rest.
yeah.
And so that has that time to heal. Like it's not inactivity during that year for that soil. It is becoming more nutritious, nutrients in it.
Mhm.
It's able to heal from the productivity that it's been doing for the last 6 years. And then there were other kinds of Sabbath like rest periods in the ancient Israelites lifestyle that we just lack.
Mhm.
That kind of pace of stopping for extended periods of time. Even vacations aren't really restful.
Often, yes.
Yeah, we come back and we're exhausted. We
Yeah.
had an experience, but very rarely did we take a vacation that led to us trusting in God. But the closest may be
Yeah.
like a missions trip, but we don't think of a missions trip as a vacation.
Yeah.
What were you
Yeah, I
gonna say?
think that is interesting because contrary to what I think a lot of people think about me, I am not a very busy person. I hear people will always be like, "Oh, I know you're so busy. I hate to bother you." Like at work, I have a lot I do, but we don't have kids. I think I've talked about that on the podcast before. So I'm not shuttling people, little people places and stuff like that. I'm not a busy person. And so sometimes it's easy for me to think that I'm winning at this resting thing because my life is not busy with activities, but that is very different than like stopping and purposefully like just delighting in God and rest like what you were talking about in your sermon today. That today was one of those that's like a punch in the gut. I remember I will sometimes tell people like, yeah, if you want a preacher that's like going to always make you feel good, Josh is probably not your guy.
I hate that. I don't mean to do that. I
No,
honestly.
but I always follow it up though with, but I need that. Like I need the punch in the gut sometimes because otherwise I won't change anything. So hopefully something will change in my life now. But yeah, it was thank you for it because it was very good today.
Well, this one was um I said in the second service, I read it multiple times. You hear it once, I preach it twice, but it's like, I'm getting punched multiple times over, especially with that, does God bore you? Like,
Yep.
if anything, like I just wanted to read the quote and then I had to add the commentary afterwards. And I'm like, oh man,
That
because
was one place.
that's a
So
real one.
this is why I had Matthew bring me my journal because I'm like, I know that I did write a question. So here you go. None of our
Viewers right
people
now.
who are none of our viewers are sending in questions, but I've got one for you. So,
Oh boy.
like, if somebody they heard that and they're sitting there like, yeah, I kind of think maybe sometimes God does bore me, but I don't know what to do about it. What would you suggest? Where do you suggest someone would start?
I would first ask, are you praying?
Hmm.
God, I confess that I'm bored with you and I want to be passionate, joyful, delighted in you.
Hmm.
Right there is where I would begin, and I would pray that prayer every single day. I would write that prayer down somewhere and make sure that I've prayed it every single day. And then, I do that. I don't know how long you do that for before you try to do anything else, because the efficiency monster is going to rear its head up,
Yeah.
and prayer is not efficient. But I would begin with prayer because that's the admitting that something is not right. You
Yeah.
can pray that prayer. Pray, God, I'm about to open your word, and I don't want this to be school. I want this to be delighting in my relationship with you, that amaze me that I'm getting to hear from you right now. Like
Mm.
start with that kind of prayer, and see what happens at that point. I think in the most part, it is, if you recognize it, that's a great first start. Start praying. I
Mhm.
have I think we mentioned this in the very first episode back this year, that the prayers for myself was that category that I realized that I'd failed to do for a while.
Mhm.
And these are the kinds of things that I pray for myself. You spot something, and I would just encourage you, start praying and pray for these things every single day. Don't stop knocking and knocking and knocking on the door, is the biblical
Yeah.
metaphor of of wanting to delight more in God. That's where I would start. There's many river fingers that branch off after that, but that is the beginning, the spring that the river starts at. Thank you for your question, Laura. Like the one sermon question. Upcoming event to share, and then we got 2 listener questions if nobody else sends anything in.
Sure. So I picked the mobile food pantry, but a little different spin on it. Normally, when we talk about the mobile food pantry, it's because we need volunteers, and we are actually all set, I believe, on volunteers. It's coming up Saturday. So today is Sunday. It'll be the next Saturday. And I just kind of thought maybe it would be good to remind people that there are a lot of people in our community, our neighbors, maybe family members, maybe some people who even listen to our podcast, who could benefit from the food pantry. It's free. It's open to anyone. You do have to pre-register, I believe, with Chopin Hall. This is something that we do in partnership with them. So you can call the church and we can give you their information, but you can't like actually register through Gateway. You have to register through Chopin Hall. But just to remind people that that is a resource that's out there for our community, and it's a great thing. So.
And I know that, again, based on Christian Clearinghouse's meeting, that due to grocery prices, this is a big need in our community and a great service. So make sure you pass on, as Laura's saying, pass on the word.
Yeah.
People may not know about this service. You may be in need and not know about this service. Please, we don't want anyone being hungry or any of that stuff. There is no shame to be carried with that, no guilt to be carried with that. Let these organizations, through churches and partnerships, help you and bless you with the food that you need. Listener questions, Laura.
All right, listener question number 1. So
let me apologize to questioner number 1. Very underwhelming answer and response to.
It kind of is.
Sometimes it happens.
I can relate though. Remember I had a question sitting in the queue for like a year or year and a half, and you finally answered it. It was very underwhelming as well. So I feel your pain here.
This one is more of an answer though.
Yeah, it wasn't just I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody's been reading in Genesis, because we've gotten several questions from the same listener, and they're all in Genesis. I love it. All right, in Genesis 11:8-9, God scatters people throughout the earth. How did the people get spread out? Did God just pick them up and place them somewhere, or what happened there?
So, drum roll, Josh's fantastic answer. They walked. Maybe some rode camels. I don't know. Like, it is not a supernatural God picking them up and putting them somewhere. It's historic recording. Just think of it. How would God get people to where they were? They all walked. They moved there on their own feet or on animals. Nothing miraculous would be the way to describe it. Just when we're reading stuff that's historical narrative, read it for what it says. Don't try to read too much into it.
All right.
You're getting all the timestamps in here, behind the scenes stuff. I saw that note.
I know every time. This is like our 3rd one this year. I'm getting a little bit better, although I'm going to have to tell Morgan, like, these are really rough, because I'm usually halfway through your answer before I remember, oh yeah, I was supposed to look at the timestamp. So right. I'm just kind of guessing, but I'm doing better than I did last week. Progress,
2840.
Perfection. So
2840 for question number 2.
Thank you. 2840. Okay. When Jacob wrestled with God, was God using godlike strength, or did he ease up and fight like a human?
So this is Jacob wrestling with God. This is right before he meets back with Esau, and so he's a little bit nervous about meeting Esau. Little fun fact about this passage of scripture: in a Kevin James, I believe is the actor's name, movie, Here Comes the Boom, which is about him being a science teacher trying to save the band department.
Woohoo! I've never even heard of this movie.
Oh, it's a pretty funny movie. And so to save the band department, he needs to raise like $40,000 in the year. And so he starts doing MMA fighting as a science teacher. And Kevin James is not a very in shape person. Mm-hmm. He's getting help. And there's a scene where the guys are all coming to dinner. They read this script. There's like a little devotional based on this scripture, and they all pray. Like, it's amazing to see. I don't know what his faith is or if he has faith, but very not mocking the Christian faith.
Yeah.
But this is the passage that was used because of all of the wrestling and stuff going on,
Okay.
and Jacob wrestling with
Okay.
God. So was God using godlike strength, or did he use upon Jacob?
Mhm.
God would have crushed Jacob if he was using his omnipotent power. So in some way, he eased up on Jacob. Now, the part about did he fight like a human, I don't know if we could really say that. The only, God and human is Christ. This is way before Christ became man. And so, just I don't want to be too nitpicky about that language, but I would just caution saying that he fought like a man. I would say whatever power or strength that God used, it made it possible for Jacob to live and not be crushed, even though that experience left him with a memorable limp, because Jacob walked with a limp ever since then with wrestling with God. So it was not the full power of God, because that would elevate Jacob to being really, really powerful. But it was still divine power. So I wouldn't call it fighting like a human, but yeah, God was definitely going easy on Jacob, much like he goes easy on all of us.
Yeah.
When his omnipotent power would really crush us if we got the discipline that we deserve for trying to wrestle with him. So no questions in, Laura. That is it as far as the outline. Anything else you want to share in the podcast?
I got nothing.
I will say this. I listened to an episode of Gateway Church's podcast.
Did you listen to the one about Jared?
The first stories one. And so I will say, if you have not listened to Sean's first episode of the stories of Gateway, he did it on Jared McBride. That is exactly why we changed up the podcast, because I knew Sean would nail that idea and help us get to know others in our congregation. And so if you haven't listened to that one, go listen to it. And I am looking forward to episodes that I want to listen to of learning about people at Gateway. But that was a great job. Well done. Even the outtakes after the episode was over of them talking about all of the many funny Jared digs that they did.
I haven't listened to it yet. I need to. Now I really want to.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Well, I think that is it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. If you have questions, remember Sunday nights live at 6 p.m. We would love to start this being a community interaction, interacting with you all in the comments section, or however we can do that. So start leaving comments. We love you all. We will see you next week.